Hello everyone, today I want to show you a preview of my book so that you can find out how it might help you in your early architecture career. If you didn't already know, it's called 101 Things I Didn't Learn in Architecture School and Wish I Had Known Before My First Job. I think I'm in a pretty good position to write this book at the moment because I've got enough experience that I'm a fully registered architect. I'm the principal architect at a firm of about 14 people who do residential architecture. But I'm not so experienced that I don't remember how painful it was in those early years of my career. So I've really gotten together my own thoughts and the thoughts of friends and colleagues. We've collected everything that we truly wish we had known or wish we could go back in time and tell ourselves or help ourselves with in those early years of our architecture career. So let's have a look inside. So as you can see, there really are 101 things. It's broken up into a few sections, so I'm going to take you through each of those sections. The first section starts with practice. This stuff really never gets explained to you. Either you slowly work it out over time while you're there, or worse, it can be purposefully shielded from you. Often in a larger firm, you don't get to see the client contracts or the fees or things like that. So this is really upfront just because I want you to have some context when you go into your first job. And it also makes it easier if you know the basics to then pick up and learn a bit more, particularly if you ever want to start your own practice. So a good example is this one on fees. How do architects charge fees? And it explains what's most common, what's not. This is often something, particularly if you're in a bigger firm, you just never get to see or understand. So this is one of the more sort of basic items there. And then we go through to things more like contract administration, which is a task you're not involved in until you're far more experienced, but it's still just as daunting then. So it really gives an overview of exactly what contract administration is. It was something that eluded me probably until sort of my 5th year of working. The next section we go on to is drafting. Contrary to practice information, drafting is probably the first tasks that you'll have when you join a firm. So I've captured sort of some things that will help you get started with that. Pardon me. For example, a good one is how to dimension. So some really good tips on that. It's about accuracy, consistency, and relevancy. It also explains a bit of the logic on sort of what you dimension first and how to dimension in a way that makes sense for construction. Some good general tips that can help you have best practice approaches, really. Another one under this one is a software package. So this is a great one for students if you're not working yet and deciding where you should invest your time. This sort of goes through the most common software in Australia at the moment and what you might decide to invest your time learning. The next section that we get onto is the biggest one. I've already passed it, let me go back up. Technical knowledge. This is really full of a lot of things that I remember feeling clueless about, but it also explains basic principles. So there'll be some things that you'll learn about. You might learn good ways to do it, but you don't necessarily understand the broader principle of how to approach it in a different scenario. And also an overview of things. I found it really hard. I knew the products that my firm used or products that I'd had experience with on different projects, but there's never a point where someone sits you down and says, hey, these are all the types of product in this category and this is why you might choose one over the other. So let's look at a few examples. Damp-proof course is a good one that I just really didn't understand for a long time until, particularly because I was working in commercial construction. Then when I switched to residential, I remember they laughed at me because I said, what's a damp-proof course? And it's really a very critical thing. So this is just a very basic introduction to what they are and how they work. A good example of understanding sort of overall principles of things is this one. Water goes down, flashing. So there's just some sort of general rules about how water tracks in buildings. Again, I didn't learn this one for quite a few years, but once you've got that knowledge of how it works, it empowers you to then be able to work the detail out yourself, rather than be copying details from other projects. And a great example of an overview one, this one, flooring. I actually learned a little bit writing this one because it was one of those ones where I hadn't necessarily experienced every product. But this is just a really simple overview of basic types of flooring and their benefits or things to look out for, or different features of that type of flooring. Then we have a section on ESD. So my background at the moment is the firm that I work at. Our director is actually a building scientist and quite respected in terms of sustainable construction on the east coast of Australia in particular. So I think I have a pretty good knowledge of sustainable design. As I explained in here, I've worked for 3 firms that were all sustainable in different ways. So I do pull in a bit of knowledge from everyone. I also wrote this section because I fear that a lot of young architects aren't getting a very broad education or aren't getting the chance to really wrap their head around this. So it is a fairly extensive section. One that I know students that I've tutored in the past really struggle with is how to read a sun angles diagram. So I actually take you through that. How do you understand one, and then what do you do? So this is sort of a 3D representation, and then how do you know how to react to that so that you can optimize your building for that. But there's also more technical things in here, like explaining what a U-value is. Not only explaining it, but then giving you a context of how those numbers compare to each other. How does a window compare to an insulated wall? Things like that. Regulatory compliance, another tough one. There's so many rules that we have to comply to as architects, and it took me a really long time to work out sort of the hierarchy of those rules or where to look for certain things. Again, it's the kind of thing you pick up through your work, that you know something has to be done a certain way, but what's really empowering is when you understand who legislates what, where to find it, who to ask, what documents to look up, things like that. So I give a bit of an overview about the rules we have in Australia and sort of what things different bodies legislate. I won't go through these ones in detail, but these are more just some tips. There's some tips on sort of managing clients, which I didn't learn until I had that chance to be working with clients. There's a small section on specifying. It's okay if you don't know what a specification is, read the book. Then this final section is really about you. This is probably where I had the most input from friends and colleagues. It's all the things we wish we could go back in time and tell ourselves as young architects. One of my favourites is how to handle not knowing the answer. Let me find that one. This one. So, you know, things in there, I actually give you 3 different lines that you can use if you're on site and you don't know the answer, depending on your experience level and what the situation is. I know that one's always popular. So, that is the book. It's coming out over summer, so it's just been with the editor this week. We're working on the cover design and things like that. It's going to be, I think, recommended retail price about $28 on Amazon. But if you jump on the Pozible page to pre-order it, you get free postage, and that's for most places around the world. You can just check in there. So it is a bit of a discount for jumping on early, and you can sort of set and forget it then. If you jump on and order it today, you'll know that as soon as it's ready, it will simply be delivered to you. I I really think it's useful. I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't just a vanity project. I'm pretty frustrated at our industry, and pretty frustrated that we all have this sort of narrow learning path. It's so important what we learn on the job, but the nature of how we do it in individual firms gives us a very narrow learning. So I really tried to collect as much broad information as I could, but in a really simple, straightforward manner, so that you can have that bigger picture, you can hit the ground running, you can refer to it if you feel a bit lost. And I just hope it helps a lot of people. So I'll put the link below here, and you can pre-order it if you want to. Please tell your friends about it. Thanks. Bye.